My son got married and never told me. I saw it on Instagram. Him in a suit, next to his wife in a white dress. I didn't say anything. The next day, I sold the house he lived in. That was my way of making a toast. If this story is breaking your heart, subscribe. Every day, there's a story that could be yours. Tell us where you're listening from. 3 in the morning. The cell phone vibrated on the nightstand and woke me up. It wasn't a call. Just one of those notifications I don't really understand. I grabbed the device with my right hand, the one that still aches ever since a brick fell on it 15 years ago, and I looked at the screen with half-closed eyes. Instagram. My granddaughter had installed that thing for me 2 months ago. "Grandpa, this way you can see everyone's photos," she told me, patiently teaching me how to tap the little buttons. I asked her what for, if nobody posts photos of me. She laughed. "Grandpa, it's so you can see everyone else's." I opened it without much thought, just because I couldn't get back to sleep and the house was too quiet. The first photo I saw was of my son Simon, my only son. He was in a navy blue suit, elegant, with a gray tie, and his hair combed back with gel. I just stared at that image like an idiot, not understanding. When had he bought that suit? Why was he so dressed up? He never dressed like that. Well, he never dressed like that for me. I tapped the screen and more photos appeared. In the second one, he was hugging a woman dressed in white. A long dress, with lace on the shoulders, a bouquet of white roses in her hands. And Simon was looking at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I blinked 3 times in a row. 4, 5, as if blinking would wake me up from this nightmare. My name is Thomas Duval. I'm 73 years old, and right at this moment I'm looking at my son's wedding photo without understanding how I got here. I swiped to the next photo. There were the in-laws. A guy in his 60s, expensive gray suit, a toothpaste ad smile. A woman in a pink dress, pearl necklace, expensive salon hairdo. Both of them hugging my son. Both smiling as if they had just won the lottery. And in the middle, Simon, happy, beaming, with his arms around them. I brought my face closer to the phone, looking for myself. Looking for myself in some corner of that photo, in some reflection. Nothing. I swiped to the next one. A toast. Champagne glasses raised, people laughing, a huge hall with golden lights and white flowers hanging from the ceiling. How lovely, how elegant, how perfect it all was. I looked at the post's date. Yesterday at 7:47 p.m. I looked up at the wall clock in my room. 3:22 a.m. I did the math in my head, slowly, because the numbers don't come as fast as they used to. 8 hours. 8 hours ago, my son had gotten married. 8 hours ago, he had promised eternal love. 8 hours ago, he had toasted with champagne and cut a cake and danced the waltz. And I was here, in my one-bedroom apartment, sleeping on a mattress with a dip in the middle from so much use, knowing nothing, without a call, without an invitation, without a dad. I'm getting married on Saturday. Nothing. I went back to the photos. I looked at all of them, one by one. There were about 30 images. 30. The decorated hall, the main table with white linens and huge flower centerpieces, the couple cutting the cake, the guests dancing, Simon lifting his wife in his arms while everyone clapped. I zoomed in on each photo with trembling fingers, looking for myself, looking for my face at some table in the back, looking for even my shadow, but I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere. Not in any photo, not at any moment. It was as if I didn't exist, as if the 45 years I spent raising that man had been a dream, as if I were invisible. I scrolled down to the comments. There were hundreds. Congratulations. What a beautiful couple. The in-laws look so happy. That last comment stabbed me in the chest. The in-laws. Yes, they were happy. They were right there, front row, hugging him, toasting with him. And I, his father, the one who gave him life, the one who worked for 40 years so he'd have a plate of food on the table. I didn't even deserve a mention. I kept scrolling. So lucky to have a family like that, said another. A family like that. A family where I didn't fit. A family that included them but excluded me. I sat perfectly still, phone in my hands, feeling something break inside me. But it wasn't pain. Not yet. It was confusion. It was shock. It It was the feeling of being wide awake in the middle of a nightmare you can't escape. I looked at the date again. Yesterday. Which means less than 24 hours ago my son was organizing this. Less than a week ago he was trying on that suit. Less than a month ago he was sending out invitations. And at no point, in all those days, weeks, months of preparation, at no point did it cross his mind to call his father and say, "Dad, I'm getting married." I took a deep breath and put the phone face down on the table. But 5 seconds later I grabbed it again. I went back to the photos. I looked at them again. All of them. Again. As if I needed to confirm they were real, that I wasn't hallucinating, that my son had truly gotten married without telling me. I zoomed in on the toast photo. I counted the tables. 8 tables. 10 people per table. 80 guests. 80 people who did deserve to be there. 80 people who knew about the wedding before I did. Simon's co-workers, the bride's friends, the uncles, the cousins, the neighbors. Everyone, except me. I have a small apartment here in the Bella Vista neighborhood, with a kitchen I barely use. Because why cook if I eat alone? And a living room with an old armchair where I spend my afternoons watching TV without really seeing it. I've been a widower for 5 years, since my wife died of cancer. My son showed up 3 times during the year and a half she was in agony. I worked for 40 years as a construction worker until my body just gave out. And I have a son who got married last night without telling me. A son who erased me from his life as if I were a stain that needed to be hidden. A son who taught me that it doesn't matter how much you give. If the other person decides you're worthless, you are worthless. I left the phone on the table and sat on the bed, my back against the cold wall. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there in the dark with my eyes open, staring at nothing. Outside, I could hear the distant bark of a dog, the engine of a passing car, the heavy silence of 3 in the morning when the world is asleep, and you're the only one awake with your pain. I thought about calling him, grabbing the phone, dialing his number, waiting for him to pick up and ask him, "Why, son? Why did you do this to me?" But I didn't, because deep down I already knew the answer. Because he didn't want me there anymore. I didn't cry that night. My eyes burned, yes. My throat closed up, yes. But the tears didn't come. Maybe I didn't have any left. Maybe I used them all up crying alone in the hospital, while my wife was dying and my son wasn't answering his phone. Or maybe the pain was just too big to fit into tears. It was bigger than that. It was an emptiness, a huge hole in my chest where a son used to be. I didn't cry that night, but something inside me, something that had kept me standing all these years. That night, it died. And when the sun came up at 6 in the morning, I was no longer the same man. My wife Lucy died on a Tuesday in April, at 4:37 inches the afternoon. I was holding her hand when she stopped breathing. A hand that was once strong, that cooked, that sewed, that caressed my face when I came home tired from work. That hand slowly grew cold, and I kept holding it for another half hour, because I didn't want to let go. Because letting go of that hand meant accepting that Lucy was gone. The cancer took her in a year and a half of agony. Chemotherapies that didn't work, pain that no morphine could dull. And I was there, every day, sleeping in a chair next to her hospital bed, because I wasn't going to let her die alone. Simon arrived that day at 5:30, an hour late. He walked in smelling like his office, his suit wrinkled, in a hurry. "Sorry, Dad, there was a lot of traffic. Lucy had been asking for him for 3 days straight. Where's Simon?" She'd ask me with her weak voice. Every time she opened her eyes. I would lie to her. "He's on his way, honey. He's coming." But he wasn't coming. I'd call him, and it would go to voicemail. I'd send him texts. "Your mom is asking for you." And he'd reply hours later. "I'm on my way, Dad. I just have an important meeting at work. An important meeting. More important than saying goodbye to your mother who is dying." When he finally arrived that Tuesday, she was no longer conscious. She couldn't speak. She couldn't look at him. Simon knelt by the bed, touched her forehead, and cried for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Then he hugged me, said, "I'm so sorry, Dad," and left. He had things to do. I worked 40 years in construction. I started at 17, fresh from the countryside, knowing how to do nothing but carry heavy things and follow orders. "Kid, grab those bricks and take them to the 3rd floor," they'd tell me. And I'd go up, under the sun that burns your skin in summer, under the freezing rain in winter. Without gloves, because there was no money for gloves. Without a helmet, because they didn't use them back then. With nothing but my back, my arms, and the need to bring food home. I finished at 57, when my knees couldn't take it anymore, and my back hurt so much that some days I'd wake up and couldn't get out of bed. 40 years carrying bricks, mixing cement, putting up walls, and all that sacrifice had only one name: Simon. Look at these hands. Seriously, look at them. They're covered in scars. This index finger is crooked because a beam fell on it while I was setting up scaffolding. This callus here on my palm is from holding a shovel for so long. These deep lines are from 40 years of hard labor. These hands never signed a big check, never held a college degree, never touched anything delicate. They just worked. They just gave. They just built the life that Simon has now. Every time he sits at his office desk, with air conditioning, hot coffee, and clean hands, he should remember these broken hands that paid for that life. When Simon was 7, he came home from school crying because the other kids were making fun of him. "I don't have sneakers like them, Dad," he told me, his face red with shame. The sneakers he had were from a discount bin, 2 sizes too big so they'd last, with the logo peeling off. I looked at him with a broken heart and said, "Tomorrow, you'll have new sneakers." That night, I worked a double shift. I got home at 2 in the morning, my body destroyed, and the next day, I took him to the shoe store and bought him the sneakers he wanted, the white Nikes with the black stripe. They cost me half my paycheck. But when I saw his happy face, when I saw him running in those sneakers, I knew it was worth it, worth every extra hour, every backache, every penny. I saved for 25 years to buy the house. 25 years putting money in a coffee can I kept hidden in the closet. Every month I'd put in what I could. Sometimes it was $100, sometimes $50. There were months I could only put in $20 because Simon needed school supplies, or clothes, or money for a field trip. But I always put in something. Always. While my coworkers bought cars, I kept riding my bicycle. While others went on vacation to the coast, I stayed behind and worked. "Not going anywhere this summer, Thomas?" they'd ask. "No, not this year," I'd answer. But the truth is, I never went anywhere, because every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar closer to that house. When I finally had the money, I went to the bank and took it all out, in cash. I remember that day perfectly. The teller looked at me funny when I told him I wanted it all in bills. "That's a lot of cash, sir," he warned. "I don't care," I said. I stuffed it all into an old backpack and walked to the real estate office, hugging that backpack like it was a baby. The agent showed me the house in the Queen's Landing suburb. It was small, 1 bedroom, with a patio the size of a dinner table. The walls needed paint, the bathroom had a leak, the kitchen had broken tiles. But it was mine. "Well, it could be mine. Do you want it?" he asked. I looked at that house, and I saw Simon living there, safe, with his own roof. "Yes," I said, "I want it." And right there, I emptied the backpack onto his desk. The guy counted the bills for half an hour, and when he finished, he gave me the keys. Simon was 28 when I gave him the house. He had just graduated as an engineer. He'd gotten his first stable job and was paying expensive rent for an apartment downtown. I was living in a smaller, cheaper place, enough for just me. One day I called him and told him to come over. When he arrived, I already had the keys on the kitchen table. "Sit down," I told him. He sat, looking confused. I pushed the keys toward him. "What's this, Dad?" he asked. "Your house," I said. "I bought a house with my savings, and it's for you. So you never have to suffer like I did. So you never have to pay rent or live in fear of being evicted. This house is yours, son." He was quiet, just staring at the keys, and then he looked at me, and he cried. That hug was real. I swear on my life. I felt it. He hugged me tight, like he hadn't hugged me since he was a little boy. I felt his arms around me. I felt his shaky breath on my shoulder. I felt his tears wetting my shirt. "Thank you, old man," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you for this. It's the biggest thing anyone has ever done for me." I put my hand on his head, like I used to when he had nightmares, and I told him, "You don't have to thank me for anything, son. Just be happy. And remember your old man every once in a while. He pulled away, looked me in the eyes, and told me something I'll never forget. "I'll never let you down, Dad. I promise. Never." I remember that promise every night when I go to bed alone. I hear it in his voice. "I'll never let you down, Dad." But he already has. I never legally transferred the house. I gave him the keys. I said, "It's yours." And he moved in with all his stuff. But the papers, the deed, the title of ownership, everything stayed in my name. It wasn't planned. I just never did it. The process was expensive, complicated. You had to go to a notary, pay taxes. And I thought, it's all for him anyway. When I die, it'll be his. Why waste money on papers? Besides, deep down, I liked knowing it was still mine. That I still had something. Because after giving him my entire life, that house was the only proof that I had existed, that I had done something, that I had been a good father. That hug, the day I gave him the keys, was the last time my son touched me with love. The last time I felt like I truly mattered to him. The last time I was his father, and not just some awkward old man he had to greet out of obligation. After that, everything changed. Slowly, but it changed. The visits got shorter. The calls became more spaced out. The excuses became more frequent. "I can't, Dad. I have work. I can't. I have plans. I can't. I'm busy." And I became smaller and smaller in his life, more and more invisible, until I disappeared completely from his wedding photos. 2 years ago, Simon called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was washing my lunch dishes, alone as always, when the phone rang. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," he said, with a voice I hadn't heard in months. He sounded happy, excited. "I met a girl. Her name is Valerie, and I want you to meet her." My heart skipped a beat. My son, my Simon, had finally found someone. "Of course, son. Whenever you want. Come to the house. I'll make us a barbecue." There was a short silence on the other end. Let's go to a cafe instead, Dad. It's quieter." I didn't understand why a cafe was quieter than my house, but I said yes. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a cafe downtown, one I'd never set foot in because a cup of coffee there cost what I spent on food for 3 days. I got there half an hour early. I wore my best shirt, the light blue one Lucy had given me years ago, the one I barely wore so it wouldn't wear out. I combed my hair with gel. I cleaned my hands thoroughly, although the scars and calluses never go away, no matter how much you scrub. I sat at a table in the back and waited, nervous as a teenager. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted this girl to see me and think, Simon is so lucky to have a father like this. When I saw them walk in, I stood up immediately. Simon was in a nice suit, and she was beautiful. Long brown hair, expensive clothes, a designer handbag. She walked with her back straight, head high, as if she owned the world. I approached them with a huge smile. "Valerie, what a pleasure to meet you. Simon has told me so much about you." She looked me up and down. It wasn't a quick glance. It was slow, deliberate. Her eyes stopped on my light blue shirt, which was already a bit faded. They moved down to my hands, to the scars, to the calluses, to the fingernails that are never completely clean no matter how hard you scrub. Then her eyes moved up to my face, and she held my gaze with a coldness that chilled my blood. "Nice to meet you," she said, without smiling, without offering her hand. Her hands just hung at her sides, as if touching me might infect her with something. I lowered the hand I had extended to shake hers, and shoved both my hands into my pockets, ashamed. Simon cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, let's sit down." We sat. I ordered a simple coffee. They ordered some long names in Italian that I didn't understand. During that whole meeting, Valerie barely spoke to me. When I asked her a question, she'd answer with one-word syllables, looking at Simon, as if waiting for him to translate. "What do you do for a living, Valerie?" "Business administration." "Oh, that's nice. What company do you work for?" "My father's." "And how is your family?" "Fine." Silence. Simon filled the silences by talking about anything. Work, the weather, a show they were watching. I nodded, I smiled. I tried to seem interesting, but I felt invisible, like I wasn't really there. When we finished our coffees, I offered to pay. "No, Dad, I'll get it," Simon said quickly. almost snatching the wallet from my hands. Valerie looked at him with approval, as if telling him, "Good boy." From that day on, something changed. Simon's visits became shorter, more spaced out. Before, he'd come on Sundays and stay all afternoon. We'd drink coffee, watch football, just talk. After meeting Valerie, he'd come for an hour, 2 at most, and he was always checking his watch. "Sorry, Dad, I have to go. Valerie's waiting for me." At first, I didn't say anything. I understood he was in love, that he wanted to spend time with her. But slowly, I started to realize it wasn't just that. It was that she didn't want him to be with me. It was that every minute Simon spent with me was a minute she'd hold against him later. One day I got up the nerve to ask about her. "How's Valerie, son? When do I get to see her again?" Simon changed the subject instantly. "She's fine, Dad. Hey, I hope you can meet her parents someday. They're very interesting people." I went quiet. "I hope you can meet her parents," as if I were someone who needed to be presented to them, as if I were the boyfriend and they were the in-laws. Then I started noticing other things. When I'd call him, he'd answer in a low voice, in whispers. "Dad, I'm with Valerie. Can I call you later?" But he never called later. When I'd send him texts, it took him hours to reply. And when he did, it was a short, dry sentence. "Okay, Dad, we'll talk later. Can't now." One afternoon I invited him for lunch. I had cooked his favorite meal, chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes, just like his mom used to make. I bought the meat from the neighborhood butcher. I breaded it with my own hands. I made homemade mashed potatoes with butter and milk. I set the table nicely, with the tablecloth we used for special occasions. I called him, excited. "Son, I made steaks. Are you coming for lunch?" Silence on the other end. "I can't, Dad. Valerie wants us to have lunch with her family." I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking at the set table, the steak still warm in the pan. "And what about me?" I asked, and my voice came out weaker than I wanted. "Am I not family?" Another silence. Longer, heavier. "Another day, old man," he finally said, and he hung up. I sat down at the table and looked at the 2 steaks on the plate, the steaming mashed potatoes, the glass of ice water, all prepared to share with my son. But my son wasn't there. My son was having lunch with her family, with the in-laws who hugged him and treated him like their own son. I picked up the fork and cut a piece of steak. It was good. Lucy used to make them just like this. But it tasted like nothing. I ate alone, in silence, listening to the sound of the silverware against the plate. And for the first time in 2 years, ever since Simon met Valerie, I allowed myself to think something that scared me. My son was pulling away. And it wasn't by accident, it was on purpose. The following weeks were more of the same, calls getting shorter, visits getting rarer, and when he did come, when he finally showed up at my apartment, he wasn't the same. He didn't relax. He didn't take his shoes off. He didn't sprawl on the couch like before. He'd stand, near the door, as if he were in a hurry to leave. We'd talk about trivial things. The weather, work, nothing important. And I was dying to ask him, "What happened to us, son? What did I do wrong?" But I didn't have the courage, because I was afraid of the answer. Because deep down, I already knew. I didn't fit into his new life. With my worker's hands and my faded shirt and my small apartment. I wasn't the kind of father he wanted to show off to Valerie. One Sunday he called to tell me he couldn't come. "I have a commitment with Valerie's family, Dad. We'll see each other another day." I gripped the phone tightly. "And when is another day going to be, Simon?" "It's been a month since you've come by." He sighed, as if I were bothering him. "Dad, don't start. I'm busy. I have a life. I know, son. I just want to see you. I just want to spend some time with you." Another sigh. "I promise I'll come next week. I have to go now." He hung up. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling something break inside me. The next week he didn't come, nor the week after, or the week after that. I still didn't understand, or maybe I didn't want to, but she had already decided that I didn't fit, that I wasn't the kind of father-in-law she wanted, that my worker's hands and my way of talking and my simple life were an embarrassment. And slowly, without me realizing it, she was erasing me from my son's life. Not with yelling, not with demands, but with silences, with made-up commitments, with lunches with her family that left mine out. And Simon let her. He let her erase me, because that was easier than defending me. Simon's 35th birthday fell on a Saturday in October. I woke up early that day, with one idea stuck in my head. I was going to make him the 3 milks cake he loved as a kid. The one Lucy made him every year, and he'd devour in 2 days. I went out to buy the ingredients at the neighborhood market. Condensed milk, evaporated milk, heavy cream, eggs, flour. I spent almost everything I had left for the week, but I didn't care. It was my son's birthday, and even though things were strange between us, even though we hadn't really talked in weeks, I was still his father. And fathers celebrate their children. Always. I spent the whole morning in the kitchen, beating the eggs by hand because I don't have an electric mixer, measuring the flour with a coffee mug because I don't have a scale, baking the cake in the old oven that heats unevenly. I had to watch it every 5 minutes so it wouldn't burn. While I waited for it to cook, I prepared the 3 milks mixture, following the recipe Lucy had written down in a stained notebook. When I took the cake out of the oven, I poked it with a fork and poured the mixture over it slowly, watching it soak in. I let it cool, and then decorated it with whipped cream. It wasn't perfect. The happy birthday letters were a little crooked. But I made it with love. That had to count for something. At 6 in the evening, I took the cake, put it in a cardboard box I got from the bakery, and headed for the house, his house. The house I had bought with 40 years of labor. The house I gave him so he would never have to suffer. I walked the 8 blocks with the cake in my hands, feeling my arms get tired, but I didn't care. I kept thinking about his face when he saw the cake, imagining his smile, his hug, his, "Thanks, old man, you shouldn't have." I thought that maybe this gesture would fix things between us a little, that we would sit together, eat cake, and talk like we used to, that even if it was just for a little while, I would be important in his life again. When I got to the house, I noticed something strange. There were cars parked all along the street. Lots of cars. A black BMW, a white SUV, a gray Mercedes. Expensive cars that didn't belong in this neighborhood. I could hear music coming from inside. Laughter, voices. I got closer to the door and saw there were balloons tied to the gate. Gold and black balloons. Elegant, expensive decorations. My heart started beating faster. There was a party, a birthday party, and I wasn't invited. I rang the doorbell with a trembling hand, holding the cake with the other. I waited. The music kept playing inside. The voices kept laughing. I rang again, and finally, the door opened. Simon appeared in the doorway. He was wearing an expensive white shirt, black dress pants, his hair styled with gel. He had a glass of wine in his hand, and when he saw me, his face changed. The smile vanished. His eyes went wide with something that wasn't joy. Was it panic? Shame? I don't know, but it wasn't happiness. "Dad!" It came out like a whisper, like a curse. "What are you doing here?" It wasn't a question, it was a complaint. It was a, "You shouldn't be here." I held up the cake, smiling, trying to act natural. "I came to see you, son. I made you your favorite cake, the 3 milks cake. Remember?" Simon looked at the cake. Then he looked at me. Then he glanced back, inside the house, as if calculating something. I looked past him, too, and what I saw broke my soul. Valerie was there, in an elegant black dress, talking to a group of people. The in-laws were sitting on the couch I had helped him pick out when he moved in, drinking champagne. There were trays of expensive food, crystal glasses, soft music, everyone well-dressed, well-groomed, smelling of perfume, and there I was, in my worn-out jeans, my plaid shirt, my old shoes, holding a homemade cake with crooked letters, a cake that suddenly seemed pathetic, ridiculous, poor. "Thanks, Dad," Simon said, and without waiting for an answer, he took the cake from my hands. He looked at it for a second, as if he didn't know what to do with it, and then he just left it on the porch floor, on the floor, like it was garbage, like it was something that needed to get out of sight, fast. "But we're in the middle of something right now. I'll call you later, okay?" He took a step back, already closing the door. I just stood there, empty-handed, my mouth open, unable to say anything. "Simon, But before I could finish the sentence, he closed the door. He closed the door in my face. In the face of his father, who had just walked 8 blocks with a cake made with love. He closed the door and left me outside, alone, on the porch of the house I had given him. I stood there, I don't know how long, staring at the closed door, listening to the laughter coming from inside, the music, the sound of clinking glasses, the cheers, and happy birthday that weren't for me. I looked down. The cake was still there on the floor in its cheap cardboard box. One corner of the box was crushed from the impact. I thought about grabbing it and taking it back, but I couldn't. I couldn't bend down to pick up that cake, because if I did, I would have collapsed right there. So I turned around and started walking, slowly at first, then faster, and then I was almost running, my eyes burning, my throat tight, my hands empty. If you're listening to my story, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes, knowing there are people in the world who understand me gives me the strength to keep talking. I walked the 8 blocks back to my apartment with my head down, praying to God that no neighbor would see me like this. I didn't want anyone to ask me what happened. I didn't want to have to explain that my son had closed the door in my face, that he had left me outside his party like I was a salesman, that he had left my cake on the floor like it was nothing. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the couch without turning on the light. I just sat there, in the dark, my hands shaking, trying to breathe. I didn't eat dinner that night. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't do anything. I just sat there, in the dark, replaying that moment, over and over, his face when he saw me, the panic in his eyes, the way he grabbed the cake and put it on the floor, the way he closed the door, fast, as if he wanted to hide me, as if he was ashamed of me. And the worst part, the part that hurt the most, wasn't the closed door. It was realizing that there were 80 people inside celebrating my son, 80 people who were invited, who did deserve to be there. Co-workers, Valerie's friends, the in-laws, the uncles, the cousins, everyone, except me. Everyone except the man who raised him alone after his mother died. Everyone except the man who worked 40 years to give him the very house where he now shut the door in my face. That day, that Saturday in October, I understood something I had been denying for months. My son was ashamed of me, of my workers' hands, my cheap clothes, my simple way of speaking, my simple life. I didn't fit into his new, elegant life with his rich girlfriend's family and their champagne glasses and their soft music. I was a mistake from his past that had to be hidden. And he was hiding me. Little by little, party by party, event by event, until the day he would erase me completely. And on that day, sitting on my couch in the dark, I felt something inside me harden. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something else. It was the seed of something I didn't recognize yet. But I knew it would soon start to grow. After the birthday, something in me broke, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no explosion, no uncontrollable crying. It was something quieter, more final. I started marking the days on the kitchen calendar. That old calendar the bakery gives me every year, with the saints' days and moon phases. Every day that passed without Simon calling me, I'd put a little red line with a marker. At first, I thought it was silly, that it was something a bitter old man would do. But I needed to see it. I needed physical proof that I wasn't exaggerating, that my son's silence was real. The first week, there were 2 red lines. The second week, 5. The third week, 7. And I kept marking. 12 days without a call, then 18, then 23. The calendar filled up with red lines like a prison sentence. Like every passing day was another day I ceased to exist for him. I'd look at that calendar every morning while I drank my coffee, counting the lines, adding them up in my head. 31 days, an entire month without my son calling me, without him asking how I was, without him saying, "Hey, old man, how are you?" An entire month where to him I didn't exist, and the worst part is, I didn't call either, because I was afraid of bothering him, afraid he'd tell me again that he was busy, afraid of confirming what I already knew, that I was a burden to him. But it reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Wednesday, day 23 without hearing from him, and I needed to hear his voice, even if it was just for 2 minutes. I grabbed the phone, dialed the number I knew by heart, and waited. 1, 2, 3 rings. "Hello, Dad." His voice sounded hurried, as always. "Son, how are you? It's been a long time since we talked." Silence on the other end. The sound of cars. He was on the street. "Yeah, Dad, sorry. I've just been slammed with work. Do you need something? Do you need something?" As if the only reason I'd call is if I needed something. As if I couldn't just call because he was my son and I missed him. "No, son. I just wanted to know how you were." "Fine, fine. Everything's fine." "Listen, I'm about to walk into a meeting. I'll call you later, okay? I'll call you later." That phrase, it had become the most common lie of his life. But he never called. 4 more days passed. 5, 6. The red lines on the calendar kept piling up, and I kept waiting for that call that never came. I'd sit on the couch with the phone next to me, staring at it, waiting for it to ring. But it didn't ring, or it would ring with telemarketers. "Mr. Duval? We'd like to offer you a new internet plan." "No, thank you." I'd hang up and keep waiting, like an idiot, like a pathetic old man with nothing better to do than wait for his son to remember he exists. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. It was during those days of waiting that I got sick. First it was a headache, then chills, then a fever. I took my temperature with the old thermometer Lucy kept in the medicine cabinet. 101. I went to bed thinking it would pass with a couple of aspirins and a good night's sleep, but it didn't pass. The next day the fever had climbed to 102. My whole body ached. My joints, my back, even my bones hurt. I got up to go to the bathroom and almost fell. My legs wouldn't respond right. My head was spinning. I got back in bed trembling, and there, alone, my body burning, my mind foggy with fever. I thought, I need help. I grabbed the phone with a shaky hand and called Simon. It was 11 in the morning on a Thursday. He was supposed to be at work, but I thought maybe if I told him I was sick, he would come see me. Maybe he'd bring me some food. Maybe he'd stay for a little while, just to keep me company. The phone rang 6 times before he answered. "Dad?" His voice sounded impatient. I could hear voices in the background. Laughter. "Son?" My voice came out hoarse. "Weak. I don't feel well. I have a high fever. I'm here alone and... Dad, I can't right now. I'm at a work lunch, but, son, I really feel awful. I don't know if Dad listened to me. Make yourself some tea. Get some rest. And if you still feel bad, go to the hospital. I can't go right now. I'll call you later, okay?" And he hung up. I stayed there with the phone in my hand, staring at the black screen, unable to believe it. "Make yourself some tea." That's what he told me, as if a cup of tea was going to cure me. As if I were a kid with a cold and not a 73-year-old man with a high fever living alone. I left the phone on the nightstand and lay back down. The fever kept rising. 103. 104. I started to get delirious. I saw shadows on the ceiling. I heard voices. At one point, I swore Lucy was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, stroking my forehead like she used to when I was sick. "It's okay, Thomas. It's going to pass." But when I reached out my hand to touch her, there was no one there, just empty space. I spent 3 days like that. 3 days in bed, alone, shaking with fever, only getting up to go to the bathroom and drink water. I didn't eat anything. I didn't have the strength to cook. I could barely make it to the kitchen, fill a glass of water, and go back to bed. The fridge had an expired yogurt and half a loaf of stale bread. Nothing else. My neighbors didn't know I was sick. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody asked about me. In those 3 days, I thought I was going to die there, alone, in that bed, and that nobody would find out until the smell alerted the neighbors, days later. And the saddest part is, deep down, a part of me wasn't afraid of that. A part of me was already so tired that dying alone didn't seem so terrible. On the 4th day, the fever broke. I woke up soaked in sweat, but with a clearer head. I got up slowly, testing if my legs would hold me. I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. I was haggard, dark circles under my eyes. 10 years older than I was a week ago. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and the fear. I put on clean clothes. I made myself some tea and a piece of toast. And then, when I felt strong enough, I grabbed the phone and called Simon. I needed to tell him I had been sick. I needed him to know I had a terrible time and he wasn't there. Maybe it wasn't to make him feel guilty. Maybe I just needed him to know. He answered on the third ring. Dad? Simon? I was calling you a few days ago. I was sick, very sick. 3 days with a high fever, alone. Couldn't eat, or... Oh, yeah? He cut me off, as if I were telling him it had rained. That's great that you're better, Dad. Listen, I'm in the middle of something important right now. Can I call you later? There was no concern in his voice. No guilt, nothing. It was the voice of someone answering the phone just to be polite, but who is already thinking about hanging up. Simon, I had a really bad time, I thought. Dad, I have to go. We'll talk later. And he hung up. He didn't wait for me to finish my sentence. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't offer to come by. He didn't say anything. He just hung up. And I sat there, on my couch, with the phone in my hand and the cold tea on the table. I was his father, the man who raised him alone after his mother died, the man who worked 40 years so he could have a better life, the man who gave him a house. But to him, at that moment, I wasn't that anymore. I was an obstacle, an annoying obligation, an old man who called too much and demanded attention he no longer wanted to give. And the worst part is, he didn't know how to get me out of his life without looking like the bad guy. So he just erased me, little by little, call by call, silence by silence, until I just stopped existing, until I was just a number in his contacts that rang every once in a while, and that he answered with annoyance. 2 months after I was sick, my neighbor from the 4th floor, Martha, came to visit. She's 60, a widow like me. Every now and then she brings me some stew, or we have coffee in my apartment. That day she came over with her phone in her hand and a smile. Mr. Thomas, do you use Instagram? I shook my head. I have the app because my granddaughter put it on there, but I don't know how to use it. Martha sat down next to me. Let me teach you, it's easy. You can see photos of your family, your friends. It's nice. She grabbed my phone and started explaining how to search for people, how to see photos, how to like them. I nodded, trying to understand, but deep down I didn't see the point. Until Martha said, "Look up your son, that way you can see what he's up to." When Martha left, I stayed there with the phone in my hand. Look up your son. The idea made me curious. It had been almost 2 months since I'd seen him. Almost a month since we'd spoken for more than those 2 minutes when I called after being sick. Maybe on Instagram I could see what he was doing, how he was, who he was with. I opened the app, went to the search icon like Martha had taught me, and typed his name, Simon Duval. His profile popped up. His picture was of him smiling, wearing sunglasses, on some beach I didn't recognize. I tapped his name to see more, and that's when I found something I didn't expect. This account is private. I couldn't see anything. Not the photos, nothing. My own son had a private profile, and I couldn't see his life. I felt like an idiot, like a spy. But my curiosity was stronger than my shame. I went back and created a new account. I didn't use my name. I put Peter Towers, a random name, and for the profile picture I uploaded an image of a landscape I found on the internet, nothing that identified me. I searched for Simon again and sent him a friend request from that fake account. Peter Towers wants to follow you. I left the phone on the table and went to make dinner, feeling ridiculous. What was I doing? Spying on my own son? Creating fake accounts like a teenager? But I couldn't stop, because I needed to know. I needed to see what was so important in his life that he had to forget about me. The next day, I checked my phone. Simon had accepted my request. Peter Towers now follows Simon Duval. My heart started beating fast. I went to his profile and now I could see everything. There were hundreds of photos. I started scrolling, looking at them one by one. Simon at a fancy restaurant, toasting with Valerie. Simon on a trip to the beach with her. Simon at his in-laws' house at a barbecue, laughing. Simon at a birthday party, surrounded by people I didn't know. Photo after photo after photo. of a life I didn't know, of a life I was not a part of. I kept scrolling. More dinners, more trips, more celebrations. I wasn't in any of the photos. Not one. And then I saw them. The wedding photos. They were right there. Posted 2 days ago. My finger froze on the screen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Simon in a suit, Valerie in a white dress. An elegant hall, flowers, glasses, happy people. My son had gotten married. He had gotten married, and I knew nothing about it. I looked at the date of the post, 2 days ago. But in the description it said, "The best day of our lives." November 14th. I did the math quickly. Today was the 16th. The wedding had been 3 days ago. No, wait. I read the comments. Beautiful wedding. Congratulations. And then I saw another comment that said, "The party yesterday was so beautiful. Yesterday. The party was yesterday. So." The civil ceremony was 3 days ago, and the big party was yesterday. I froze, trying to process what I was seeing. My son had organized a wedding, a complete wedding, civil ceremony, a reception, a hall, decorations, invitations, catering, a photographer. All of that takes months of planning. Months of choosing the venue, tasting food, sending invitations, confirming guests. Months where he was busy preparing the most important day of his life. And at no point in all those months did it cross his mind to call me and say, "Dad, I'm getting married." Not even at the end. Not even the day before. Nothing. I found out 2 days later, by spying on his Instagram with a fake account. That's what he had turned me into, a sad old man spying on his son. Because it was the only way to know what was happening in his life. I started reading the comments, looking for something. Anything that would tell me I wasn't crazy, that it was normal to feel what I was feeling. There were hundreds of comments. What a beautiful couple, the most handsome bride and groom. What an incredible party. And then I saw one that drove a knife into my chest. It was from the father-in-law, the same guy I had seen in the birthday party photos, the one in the expensive gray suit. His comment said, "Welcome to the family, son. We are so proud of you, son." He called him son, and Simon had replied with a heart emoji. I scrolled down a little more and found another comment from the mother-in-law. "Now you finally have a family that deserves you. We love you so much. A family that deserves you." As if I didn't deserve him. As if I hadn't been good enough. As if 40 years of raising him alone counted for nothing. I kept looking at the photos, one by one, my hands shaking. I looked for any mention of me, any thanks to my dad who couldn't be here, any "I dedicate this moment to my old man who always supported me," anything, but there was nothing. I didn't exist at that wedding. I didn't exist in his life. It was as if I had died years ago, and nobody had bothered to tell me. I zoomed in on the photos of the hall, looking for myself at a table in the back, thinking that maybe he had invited me and I'd forgotten to go. But no, I wasn't anywhere. I counted the tables, 10 tables, 10 people per table, 100 guests, 100 people who deserved to be there, 100 people who were more important than me, his father. I sat on the couch until it got dark. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't make dinner. I didn't do anything but look at those photos over and over, as if looking at them enough times would make me understand what happened. But there was nothing to understand. It was simple. My son had erased me from his life. He had replaced me. The in-laws were his new parents. Valerie was his new family. And I was the embarrassing past that had to be hidden. The blue-collar father with the broken hands and cheap clothes who didn't fit into his elegant life. I felt something shatter inside my chest. It wasn't pain, not anymore. It was something else. It was clarity. It was finally understanding that I was never going to be good enough for him. That it didn't matter how much I gave him, how much I sacrificed, how much I loved him. It would never be enough. If you've ever been erased like that, if you know what it feels like to be excluded from the most important moments, subscribe to this channel. You are not alone in this pain. There are thousands of people who know what it's like to be invisible to someone who is supposed to love you. I left the phone on the table and just sat there, in the dark, listening to the silence of my apartment. Cars passed by outside. A dog barked in the distance. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't want to keep begging for love. I didn't want to keep waiting for my son to remember I existed. I didn't want to keep feeling this constant humiliation of being ignored, excluded, erased. Something in me changed that night. Something hardened. Because it's one thing to be forgotten, it's another thing to be replaced. And that I was not going to forgive. My son didn't just exclude me from his wedding. He replaced me. He found new parents who seemed better than me. Parents with money, with a name, with a big house and an elegant vocabulary. Parents who didn't remind him where he came from, who didn't remind him that his pretty life was paid for by an old man who broke his back laying bricks. And I was left there, alone, in my small apartment, looking at the photos of the perfect family my son had chosen. A family where I didn't fit, where I would never fit. Because I wasn't his father anymore. I was just the mistake from his past that he had successfully erased. But he made one mistake. He forgot that the house he lived in, the house he would surely bring his new wife to, the house that gave him that comfortable life, that house was still mine. 3 days passed without me calling Simon. 3 days of looking at the phone, picking it up, dialing the first few numbers, and then deleting them. 3 days of making excuses to myself. Maybe he didn't invite me because he thought I was still sick. Maybe he wanted something small and they'll do a family celebration later. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I was looking for explanations where there were none. Because the truth hurts. And I still wasn't ready to accept that my son had erased me on purpose. That it wasn't an oversight. That it wasn't a mistake. That it was a conscious decision to exclude me from the most important day of his life. But deep down I already knew. I just needed to hear him say it. On the 4th day, I woke up at 5 in the morning with my heart racing. I had dreamed of Lucy. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, young, like when we got married. And she was looking at me sadly. "Ask him," she was saying. "You need to ask him." I woke up with that voice in my head. I needed to ask him. I needed to hear it from his mouth. Even if it hurt, even if it destroyed me. I got up. I made some coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand. It was 6:30 the morning. Too early to call. I waited until 9, then 10, then 11. At 11:20, I couldn't wait anymore. I dialed his number with a trembling finger. The phone started to ring. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. I thought he wouldn't answer. I thought it would go to voicemail and I'd have to leave a pathetic message asking him why he didn't invite me to his wedding. But on the 5th ring, he answered. "Dad? Son?" My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. "Son, I need to talk to you." "Dad, I'm on my honeymoon. I can't talk right now." Honeymoon. The 2 words hit me like fists. Honeymoon. After a wedding I didn't go to. After a party where I didn't exist. "It will only take 2 minutes," I told him. I heard a long sigh on the other end. Voices in the background. Valerie asking something. Simon covering the phone and answering her. Then he came back. "Okay, make it quick." I swallowed. The words were stuck in my throat. "Son, I saw the pictures on Instagram, the pictures of your wedding." Silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. That confirmed everything I needed to know. He knew that I knew. And he didn't care. "You got married?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I needed to hear him say yes. I needed him to admit it. "Yes," he finally said. One word. Dry. No explanation. No apology. "And why didn't you tell me?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted. More broken. "It was something intimate, Dad. Something intimate." I clung to that word like a drowning man. Maybe it was intimate. Maybe it was just the 2 of them and a judge. Maybe the photos were from something else. "Intimate?" I repeated, and my voice came out harder. "Simon, I saw the photos." I counted the tables. There were 80 people. There was a hall decorated with flowers. There was catering. There was a photographer. There was music. That's not intimate. That is a big party that you decided not to invite me to. Silence again. I could hear him breathing on the other end. I could imagine him there, in some beach hotel with Valerie beside him. annoyed that his father was ruining his honeymoon with complaints. "Dad, don't start," he finally said. His voice had that tone, that fed-up tone you use when someone is bothering you about something you don't want to talk about. "I have to go." "No," I said, and I surprised myself with how firm it sounded. "I'm not letting you go until you explain why." "Why what, Dad?" His voice rose a little. He was getting angry, as if I were the one doing something wrong. "Why didn't you invite me to your wedding? I'm your father, Simon. I raised you alone after your mom died. I worked 40 years to give you everything. I gave you a house. And you get married. And you don't even tell me. Why?" The silence that followed was the longest of all. I could hear the ocean in the background, seagulls, people laughing in the distance, and my son on the other end of the line choosing his words, knowing that whatever he said would change everything between us. "Because I knew you'd do this," he finally said. His voice sounded tired, resigned. "Complain, make me feel guilty, ruin everything with your drama." I froze. "My drama?" The words barely came out. "Simon, you excluded me from the most important day of your life. And I'm the one with the drama? Dad, I wanted it to be a perfect day. No complications. And you're always a complication. A complication." That word went through me like a bullet. I was a complication. I, who gave him life. I, who sacrificed everything for him. I was the problem. "A complication?" I repeated, unable to believe it. "Yes," he said, and now his voice sounded annoyed, as if I were forcing him to say things he didn't want to say. "Valerie and her family are. They're on another level. You understand? And I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I didn't want them to see you, and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I understood perfectly. He didn't want them to see me. He didn't want his elegant in-laws to meet his blue-collar father with the broken hands and cheap clothes. He didn't want me to ruin his image. He didn't want me to remind everyone where he came from. "So you hid me," I said. It wasn't a question, it was a confirmation. "It's not like that, Dad." "Yes, it is, Simon. You hid me as if I were something to be ashamed of." "Dad, stop." He raised his voice for the first time. "It's done. It's over. I can't change the past. If you want to be angry, be angry. But I'm not going to keep talking about this. I have to go. Simon, wait." But he had already hung up. I heard the dial tone, and I just stood there, with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to that sound, unable to move. I sat at the kitchen table for hours. The coffee went cold. The sun moved across the window. The shadows changed places. And I just sat there, with the phone in my hand, replaying the conversation in my head over and over. "You're always a complication. I didn't want them to see you. I'm not going to keep talking about this." Every sentence was a new blow. Every word was a confirmation of what I already knew but didn't want to accept. My son was ashamed of me. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious, planned decision, executed with coldness. He excluded me on purpose, because I didn't fit into his new life, because I was the poor past that had to be hidden. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my eyes open in the darkness. The conversation repeated in my head like a broken record. And suddenly, like a lightning bolt, I understood something that chilled my blood. All that distance over the last 2 years. All those excuses. All those short visits and canceled calls. It wasn't because he was busy. It was because he was preparing the ground to erase me. First he pushed me away, little by little, so that when he finally excluded me from his wedding, I'd already be so far out of his life that it would barely be noticeable. It was a plan, a long, calculated plan, to get rid of me without having to give explanations. That's when I understood. It wasn't that he forgot me. It was that he hid me, on purpose, with premeditation, out of shame that I existed. And that hurt more than anything else. Because it's one thing to be forgotten in a moment of madness or stress. It's another thing to be hidden because you're considered an embarrassment, because they think you're a stain on their perfect life. That night, lying in my bed, staring into the darkness, I felt something break forever between us. Something that could never be repaired. Because love can survive many things, but it cannot survive shame. When your child is ashamed of you, that's the end of everything. I didn't call him again. I didn't send him messages. I didn't complain anymore. The silence that followed that conversation was different from all the silences before. Before, when he didn't call, I suffered. I waited. I'd look at the phone, praying for it to ring. But now, the silence was mine. It was my decision. And there was something liberating in that. Something that gave me back a little bit of dignity. The days passed. 1 week. 2 weeks. Simon didn't call either. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't try to fix things. And I started to plan. I started to think. I started to remember something I had forgotten. The house was still mine. I woke up one Tuesday at 6 inches the morning with a mental clarity I hadn't had in months. I got up, made myself a strong coffee, and went straight to the bedroom closet. In the back, hidden behind some old boxes, was the small safe that Lucy and I bought years ago to keep important documents. I pulled it out carefully, put it on the bed, and entered the combination I knew by heart. 2, 7, 0, 3. Simon's birthday. The safe opened with a metallic click. Inside were our birth certificates, our marriage license, Lucy's death certificate. And there, at the bottom, folded carefully, was the deed to the house in the Queen's Landing suburb. I took it out with shaking hands. I unfolded the yellowish paper, worn from the years, but perfectly legible. There it was, title deed, and below, in clear letters, owner, Thomas Duval, my name, my ID number, my signature, the date of purchase, the 12th of March 2015, almost 10 years ago. I ran my fingers over the letters, feeling the texture of the paper, remembering the day I signed this, the day I became the owner of something for the first time in my life. I searched every page for any mention of a transfer to Simon, any signature of his, any attached document. Nothing. There was nothing, because I never did the legal transfer. I gave him the keys. I said, "It's yours." But legally, officially, the house was still mine. It had always been mine. I sat on the edge of the bed with the deed in my hands and just stared at it for an hour, maybe more. The sun came in through the window and moved across the floor. The sound of cars outside, a dog barking. Life went on while I held that paper and made the most important decision of my life. I remembered every brick I paid for with my sweat, every extra hour I worked, every time my back ached and I kept going anyway because I needed the money, every penny I saved for 25 years. That house wasn't just a gift. It was my entire life converted into walls, and I gave it to him, thinking I was giving him security, love, a future. But I was wrong. I gave him everything, and he learned that everything I gave had no value. I got up from the bed, put the deed in an envelope, and got dressed. I put on my best pants, a clean shirt, shined my shoes. I combed my hair carefully. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me was not the same one who had been crying in silence for months. He was no longer the desperate father begging for attention. He was something else. He was someone who had understood something fundamental. You don't beg for dignity. Either they give it to you, or you take it back yourself. And if my son had decided I didn't even deserve a place at his wedding, then he didn't deserve the greatest gift I had ever given him. The house was going to stop being his. Not because I was vengeful, but because I finally understood that giving everything without being valued isn't love. It's self-destruction. At 9 in the morning, I grabbed the phone and looked in my contacts for the number of Mr. Ernest Miller, a neighborhood lawyer who had helped me with the paperwork when Lucy died. I dialed. He answered on the third ring. "Mr. Thomas, what a surprise. How are you?" His voice was warm, kind. "Mr. Miller, I need to sell a property. Today." There was a silence on the other end. "Today? Mr. Thomas, those things take time. We have to do appraisals, publish the listing, wait for offers." "No," I interrupted him. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. "It has to be today, or tomorrow at the latest. It's urgent." Another silence. "Are you all right, Mr. Thomas? Did something happen?" "Yes," I said. "Something happened, but I'm going to be fine." I just need you to help me sell that house as quickly as possible. Mr. Miller asked me to come to his office at 11. I arrived on time, with the envelope holding the deed under my arm. He showed me into his office, offered me a coffee, which I accepted even though my hands were shaking. He sat behind his desk and looked at me with those lawyer eyes that have seen it all. "Tell me, Mr. Thomas, why the rush?" So I told him. Not everything. I didn't tell him about the wedding. I didn't tell him my son was ashamed of me. I just told him I had decided to sell the house that was in my name, that my son lived there, but that legally it was mine, and I needed to do it fast. He nodded, without judgment, and said, "I'll make some calls. I have a client who is looking for a house in that neighborhood for his daughter. Maybe he'll be interested." At 3 in the afternoon, Mr. Miller called me. "Mr. Thomas, I have a buyer. He wants to see the house tomorrow, first thing in the morning. If he likes it, he's willing to pay cash and close in 48 hours. My heart sped up. Cash? Yes. He's a businessman who wants the house for his daughter, who's getting married next month. He's in a hurry. He's offering a fair price. It's not an offer to refuse. I gave him the address. I told him he could go see it tomorrow at 8 in the morning. I hung up. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, feeling everything start to move. There was no turning back now. I had made the decision, and something inside me, something that had been broken for months, started to feel whole again. I barely slept that night, not from anxiety, not from doubt, but from a strange mixture of nerves and peace. I lay awake, thinking about everything that had happened, about how I had gotten here, about how a father who gave everything ended up being treated like garbage, about how unconditional love becomes a weakness when the other person doesn't value it. And I understood something it took me 73 years to learn. Giving everything doesn't make you a good father. It makes you invisible, because people only value what costs them, and I never charged my son for anything. Not a thank you. Not an I love you. Not even respect. I gave him everything for free, and he learned that I was worthless. Well, it was time for him to learn another lesson. At 8 in the morning the next day, Mr. Miller called. "Mr. Thomas, the buyer saw the house. He loved it. He wants to close today. Are you sure about this?" I was quiet for a second. I thought about Simon, sleeping in that house with his new wife. I thought about him waking up, not knowing that in a few hours that house would no longer be his. I thought about how he was going to feel when I told him, and I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. "I'm sure," I said. "Tell him yes. We close today. Perfect. Come to my office at 2. Bring your ID and the deed. By 4 o'clock you'll be the owner of a good sum of money, and your son will have to find somewhere else to live." I hung up. I looked at the clock. 6 hours to go. I sat on my couch to wait. I didn't call Simon. I didn't warn him. I didn't give him the chance to beg, to explain, to promise he would change, because I didn't want his empty promises anymore. I didn't want his last-minute apologies. I wasn't taking anything from him that was actually his. I was just going to teach him what it feels like to lose what you never valued, what it feels like to have someone take away what you took for granted, what it feels like to be in my shoes, and maybe, just maybe, when he was left without a roof over his head, when he had to explain to his wife and his in-laws why they had to move out immediately, when he had to look for a new place and pay rent and feel that insecurity. Maybe then he would understand what I did for him when I gave him that house. Or maybe not, but I didn't care anymore, because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, about getting back something that had been taken from me, my dignity. At 2 in the afternoon I was sitting in Mr. Miller's office. Across from me sat a man in his 50s, elegant suit, impeccable white shirt. His name was Robert Mendez, and he owned a chain of hardware stores. He was buying the house for his daughter who was getting married in a month. "It's perfect for her," he said, reviewing the deed. "The neighborhood is quiet. The house is a good size. My daughter is going to be very happy there." I nodded in silence, thinking about the irony. This man was buying the house to make his daughter happy. I had bought that exact same house to make my son happy. The difference is, this man's daughter would probably invite him to her wedding. Mr. Miller put the papers on the desk. Sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed every page calmly. My name, my ID, my signature, 1, 2, 3 times. Mr. Mendez signed after me. Mr. Miller notarized everything. He stamped the papers, organized the files. Done, he said with a smile. Mr. Thomas, you are no longer the owner of this property. Mr. Mendez, congratulations. The house is yours. The man opened a black briefcase and took out stacks of bills. He counted them on the desk. $50,000, in cash. He had brought it like that because he wanted to close fast. I had never seen so much money in one place. Mr. Miller helped me count it, gave me a receipt, explained that I should deposit it in the bank as soon as possible. I just nodded, looking at those bills, thinking, this is what 40 years of my life is worth. This is what a father's sacrifice is worth. I left the office at 3:15 inches the afternoon. The sun was strong. The street was full of people. Cars passing. The normal life of any given Tuesday. But for me, nothing was normal. I had just sold the house where my son lived. I walked 2 blocks to a park. I sat on a bench, took my cell phone out of my pocket, and just stared at it. Now came the hard part. Now I had to call him. I had to tell him the house was no longer his, that he had 2 weeks to get out. My finger hovered over his name and my contacts. I took 3 deep breaths. 4, 5, and I dialed. The phone rang twice before he answered. Dad? His voice sounded normal, carefree, not knowing his life was about to change. Son, I said, and my voice came out calmer than I expected. I need you to vacate the house in 15 days. Silence on the other end. A confused silence. What? What are you talking about? The house where you live, the one in Queen's Landing. I need you to vacate it. Another silence. Dad, are you okay? What do you mean, vacate? I closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face, and I said the words I had been rehearsing in my head for days. I sold it this morning. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear him breathing. I could feel his brain processing what he had just heard. I could picture his face, and then, like an explosion. You did what? His voice almost broke my eardrum. He was screaming. What did you do, Dad? You sold the house? Yes, I said calmly. The house was mine, Simon. It was in my name. And I decided to sell it. I signed the papers an hour ago. No, no, that can't be. That house is mine. There it was. The sentence I was waiting for. No, son, I said, and every word came out clear, firm, without hesitation. That house was never yours. I gave you the keys. I told you it was yours, but I never legally transferred the deed. The title was always in my name. It was always mine, and now it belongs to someone else. I heard a noise on the other end, like he had thrown something. Dad! That is my house. I live there with my wife. You can't do this. Your wife, I repeated, and I let those 2 words hang in the air for a moment. That woman I don't know. That woman you married without inviting me. That woman you chose when you decided I didn't deserve to be in your life. Dad! This has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with that, Simon. It has everything to do with you erasing me from your life like I was garbage. As if 40 years of raising you meant nothing. As if giving you a house didn't even earn me an invitation to your wedding. His breathing was heavy. I could hear him pacing, panicking. Dad, please don't do this. We can talk. We can fix things. There's nothing to fix, I said. The papers are signed. The money is in my pocket. The new owners take possession in 2 weeks. Dad, you can't do this. His voice broke. Now there was desperation. Now there was fear. Where am I going to live? What do I tell Valerie? What do I tell her family? I don't know, son, I said, and my voice was still calm, serene, as if we were talking about the weather. I guess you'll have to find an apartment to rent. You'll have to scrape together money for a security deposit. You'll have to live with the insecurity of not knowing if they'll renew your lease next year. You'll have to live like I lived for 50 years. Maybe then. You'll understand what I did for you when I gave you that house. But I can't afford rent right now. We just got married. Valerie, quit her job. We're on our honeymoon. Then cut the honeymoon short and come back to find a place to live. You have 2 weeks. Have a good trip, son. And I hung up. I turned off my phone. Completely. I didn't put it on silent. I turned it off. I sat there on that park bench, with the sun setting on my face, feeling something strange in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. It was the feeling of having done something I should have done a long time ago. Taking back my dignity. Stopping my begging for love. Stopping my acceptance of crumbs. I sat there for half an hour, 40 minutes, watching people pass by. Kids playing in the park. Pigeons pecking at the ground. Normal life just continued, while my life changed forever. Then I got up, walked to the nearest bank, and deposited the money. All of it. Every last bill. It was mine. Legally. Morally. I had earned it with my sweat, and now it was in my account. When I left the bank, I turned on my phone. Immediately, it started vibrating. 1 missed call. 2, 5, 10, 20, 47 missed calls. All from Simon. And messages. Dozens of messages. I opened them and read them, one by one, without answering any. Dad, please, pick up. Dad, I need to talk to you. Dad, you can't do this. I'm begging you. Call me. Dad, please, you have to understand. I didn't mean to hurt you. Dad, answer me. I'm begging you. I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. Valerie is crying. Her family wants to talk to you. Dad, please. I read them all, and I felt nothing. Well, I did feel something. I felt satisfaction. Because now he was looking for me. Now it was urgent. Now I was important. But not because he loved me, because he needed something from me. I put the phone in my pocket without replying. I kept walking to my apartment. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees aching, as always, but I felt lighter. I entered my home, closed the door, and stood in the middle of the living room, my small apartment, my old armchair, my kitchen I barely use, my simple life, my humble life. But it was my life, and for the first time in years, I felt like it was enough, that I was enough. I didn't need my son to validate me. I didn't need him to invite me to elegant events. I didn't need to be part of his perfect life. I had my own life, and my own dignity. And right now, that was worth more than any house. Now he was looking for me. 47 calls in 2 hours. But it wasn't because he missed me. It wasn't because he realized he loved me. It was because I took something from him. Because I finally made him feel what I had felt for years. The insecurity, the fear, the loss. And I realized something fundamental. People only look for you when they need something from you. As long as I had things to give, as long as I was useful, I existed. But when I stopped giving him everything, when I stopped being the father who sacrifices in silence, when I finally set a boundary, then he reacted. But it was too late, way too late. Because you can't get respect back by begging. You get it back by acting. And I had finally acted. The next day, at 8 in the morning, someone pounded on my door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was a desperate, angry pounding. 3 hard bangs, then 4, then 5 in a row, like they wanted to break the door down. I was in the kitchen drinking my coffee. I left the mug on the table and walked to the door in no hurry. I knew who it was. I had been expecting him. I opened the door, and there was Simon. His eyes were red. His face was a mess. His hair was disheveled. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. It was obvious he hadn't slept. It was obvious he had driven all night from the beach, from his honeymoon, to get back here. He looked at me with a mixture of fury and desperation. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse and broken. I didn't say anything. I just stepped back and let him in. He entered like a hurricane, walking straight into the living room, spinning around to face me with his fists clenched. "How could you do this to me?" His voice was shaking. He was on the verge of exploding. I closed the door calmly, walked to my armchair, and sat down. I looked at him from there, calm, not upset, and that calmness seemed to make him even angrier. "I'm talking to you! How could you sell the house without telling me? How could you?" I asked, my voice low and serene. He blinked, confused. "How could I what?" "Get married without telling me," I said. "How could you do that?" He was quiet for a second, searching for words. "That's different." "No," I interrupted. "It's exactly the same." Simon rubbed his hands over his face, frustrated. "Dad, that's in the past. We can't change it. But this we can fix. Call the buyer. Tell him you changed your mind. Give him his money back. You still have time." I just looked at him in silence. My son, the man I raised, the man I gave everything to, and I recognized nothing of myself in him. "No," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" He raised his voice again. "Dad, I didn't do anything bad enough for you to leave me homeless." "Nothing?" I repeated, and something in my voice made him go silent. "Simon, you excluded me from your wedding, from the most important day of your life. You hid me as if I was an embarrassment. You erased me as if I didn't exist. I didn't want to hurt you." "Exactly," I said. "You didn't do anything. You didn't invite me. You didn't call me. You didn't give me an explanation. You did nothing." He started pacing, desperate. "It was Valerie," she thought. "She thought you wouldn't fit in with her family, that it would be awkward." There was a steel in my voice now. "What did you think, Simon? I don't care what Valerie thought. I don't care what her family thought. I care what you thought. Did you want me to be there?" The silence that followed gave me the answer. He looked down. His hands were shaking. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I thought. His voice came out as a whisper. I thought it was just easier this way, those 5 words. It was just easier this way. There it was, the whole truth. I felt something in my chest. But it wasn't pain. It didn't hurt anymore. It was peace. It was the confirmation of what I already knew. "It was easier this way," I repeated. "It was easier to erase me than to defend me. It was easier to hide me than to introduce me with pride. It was easier to push me aside than to stand up to your wife and tell her that your father, the one who raised you, the one who gave you a house, was going to be at your wedding because he damn well deserved to be." Simon looked up. His eyes were full of tears. "Dad, You found out I sold the house faster than I found out about your wedding," I interrupted. "Ironic, isn't it? I found out 2 days later on Instagram, spying on you with a fake account. You found out in minutes with a direct call. See the difference?" He just stood there, tears streaming down his face, not knowing what to say. And I kept talking, with a calmness that surprised even me. "I bought that house for you, with 40 years of breaking my back laying bricks, with 25 years of saving every last penny, with all the vacations I never took, with all the little things I never bought for myself. I bought it thinking about your future, thinking about your security, thinking that you would never suffer like I suffered." My voice cracked, just barely, but I continued. "But you decided I didn't deserve to be in your life, that I was an embarrassment, that I didn't fit into your elegant world with your rich wife's family. So, I decided you didn't deserve that house, because that house was a gift of love, and you proved to me that you don't love me." "Yes, I do love you," he shouted, his voice breaking completely. "You're my dad! Of course I love you!" "No," I said, shaking my head. "You love what I give you. You love the free house. You love the silent sacrifice. You love having a father who never asks for anything but me as a person, with my worker's hands and my cheap clothes and my simple life. You don't love me. You're ashamed of me. That's not true." "Then explain why I wasn't at your wedding," I said, my voice hard. "Explain why you never introduced me to Valerie properly. Explain why, when I was sick with a high fever, you told me to make some tea and didn't come to see me. Explain all of that." Without using the words "I was busy" or "it was just easier," he opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because he had no explanation, because the truth was obvious. Simon slumped onto the opposite armchair, his head in his hands. "Dad, forgive me," he said through his sobs. "Forgive me, please. I messed up. I know. I was a terrible son. But please, don't leave me homeless. Please, Do it for me. For everything we had together, I watched him cry. This 35-year-old man, crying like a child. And I felt nothing. Or not exactly nothing. I felt pity. But not the kind of pity that makes you give in. The kind of pity you feel for someone who is finally facing the consequences of their actions. I can't, son, I said softly. Forgiveness is for first times, for honest mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision you made, one that lasted for months. Months of planning a wedding without inviting me. Months of watching me suffer and doing nothing. I can't forgive that. But I'm your son, he said, lifting his head, his face wrecked. I'm your only son. I know, I said, and that house was the only asset I had, the only thing I had left from 40 years of work, and I gave it all to you, everything, and it wasn't enough. I was never enough for you, so I decided that you weren't enough to keep what I built. I stood up from my armchair, went to the kitchen, grabbed my coffee, took a sip. When I came back to the living room, Simon was still there, sunk into the chair, crying silently. You have 2 weeks to vacate, I told him. If you need help moving, let me know. I can come help you pack. But the decision is made. The house isn't yours anymore. It never really was. Simon stood up slowly, as if every muscle in his body was heavy. He looked at me with his red eyes, with a mixture of pain and something else. Hate? Resentment? I don't know. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. I'm never going to forgive you for this, he said without turning around. That's fine, I replied. I'm not going to forgive you for what you did either. He opened the door and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I just stood there, in the middle of my living room, coffee in hand, waiting to feel something. Guilt, regret, pain, but the only thing I felt was silence. A clean, weightless, anguish-free silence. And then, slowly, something else. Peace. I went to my old armchair, sat down, and for the first time in years, I breathed easy. Sometimes, getting your dignity back costs you a house. It costs you relationships. It costs you family. But believe me when I tell you, it's worth every penny. It's worth every tear. It's worth every uncomfortable moment. Because living without dignity isn't living. It's surviving, begging for crumbs of love from people who don't value you. And I was tired of begging. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of accepting anything just so I wouldn't be alone. That house is gone. My son is gone too, in a way. But I got myself back. I got back something I had lost years ago, in respect for myself. And sitting in my armchair, drinking my coffee, looking out the window, I finally felt at peace. It wasn't the peace of having everything. It was the peace of knowing I would never again accept less than I deserve. And that is priceless. What about you? What would you have done in my place? Would you have given him your dignity along with that house? Or would you have done the same thing I did? If this story stirred something inside you, if it made you feel anger, sadness, or even relief, leave me a comment down below telling me what you think. Give it a like if you think I did the right thing, or tell me if you think I was wrong. And subscribe to William's Revenge Stories to hear more stories like this. Stories of real people who one day said, "Enough," and took back their dignity. It means more than you can imagine. It means we're not alone in this pain, that there are thousands of people who understand what it feels like to be invisible to someone who is supposed to love you. Thanks for listening to the end. I'll see you in the next story, where we'll keep sharing these truths that hurt, but that need to be told. Until the next story.